Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Charles, and welcome you guys to another episode of the Dreamerspro Show, where we cover everything from sports, hot topics, classic debates, entertainment. We give you guys a fresh perspective on things and how we see them. And today we got a pretty interesting episode for you guys that we want you guys to stick around for. But before we get into it, please make sure you like the video and subscribe to the channel. Now, yesterday, I think some people were off from sports. I didn't see Shannon Sharp. I didn't see Skip Bayless. I didn't see them, but I did get a chance to see Ric Bucher, right? Who's been doing a great job. I remember Ric Bucher from ESPN, and I thought that he was one of the most measured, kind of level-headed basketball minds that we got going, reporters, analysts. I think he's great, right? And he doesn't really argue with emotion. He makes a lot of sense when he argues. So I like Ric Bucher. Some people don't, whatever. I personally do. So yesterday, Nick Wright was filling in for Colin Cowherd. And they brought in Ric Bucher, who was also on Speak, their new show. And they were talking about a range of things. They were talking about the All-Star game and some other things. And then it got to the point where they were discussing, Nikola Jokic being selected as one of the, towards the end of all of those players, which I thought was extremely disrespectful. How do y'all select? Whatever. Like, that was extremely disrespectful, but whatever. That they selected him that low. And Nick Wright basically use that as a springboard to basically say, hey, you see, for all of these great numbers that he's putting up, these guys don't really think he's that great. And he went on to make his point. And then towards the end of that, Ric Bucher used what he said as a linchpin to now take a dig at Nick Wright to really expose a kind of flagrant hypocrisy that he has within him in terms of his bias and his argument. So what we want to do is we want to play this exchange for you. It's a little bit lengthy, but I think you guys should take a listen to it. And then we're going to come back and react to the comments there. So take a listen to what they had to say here.
What are we doing here? Where do you stand on Nikola Jokic looking like the runaway three-time MVP?
Well, I don't have a problem with him winning it this year because this might be the first year that I would vote for him, or put him at the top of my ballot.
Me too. This is the first year. Go ahead.
But it goes to what we were just talking about. We don't value winning. They were what? They finished fifth. One of the last 2 years in the
last year they were sixth.
Yes.
So they're sixth.
How are we equating that with being an MVP? Now, what he's doing this year and the fact that Denver is at the top of the Western Conference, like, I'm good with him being an MVP and an MVP candidate this year. But the previous 2 years, for me, it was either Joel Embiid or Giannis. And I would still say Giannis is very much in that conversation this year in terms of who is going to be at the top of my ballot. So you get no argument for me on that. I really don't like the idea that we're avoiding voting for him because it would historically mean 3 in a row. The problem is that we didn't get it right the first 2 times, and now we're stuck in this position. Steve Nash was exactly the same.
Yes.
His third year was his best year, but we could not vote for him, or it could not be given to him that year because he'd already won 2 in a row.
Also, God dog it, it wasn't in the Constitution you couldn't serve more than 2 terms as president until in the last 70 years. But everyone was like, George Washington didn't do it, I guess I won't do it. Now, FDR broke that, and then they had to put it in the rules. But it shouldn't have to be written down that this is how it's done when we see this is how it's done. And I agree with you. This year, my last 3 years, 2 years ago, you and I argued about it, I would have voted Chris Paul. The numbers didn't suggest it, but the winning and everything he did. Last year, I argued for Luka. This year, Jokic has the best case he's had. But what frustrates me so much is last year, when those of us were arguing against Jokic saying, they're the 6th seed, everyone's like, it doesn't matter. Teammates, bad teammates, and, Luka's got this all-star cast around him.
Right.
And this year, when we're like, it's not Jokic, they're like, they're the 1 seed. What are you talking about? And can I show you the Raptor stat where he's the greatest player of all time? Not recognizing if any of your stats say Nikola Jokic is the greatest player of all time, that stat is flawed. But whatever. I just care about history, Rick. You and me. Oh, I could show you all these, man. Jokic is having the greatest 3-year stretch in the history of basketball. It's unbelievable. He gets picked 7th in the All-Star game every year. Nobody thinks that he's a great defender. Nobody thinks he's the number 1 bucket guy in the league. He's the best player in the league. I'll lose my mind on it. I'm a hater.
This is where I don't quite, and this is probably a conversation for another day with you and I, but how is it that you are able to accurately parse the issues with Jokic being MVP And yet the drum that you have beaten for LeBron James this year still being a great player is based on the same thing. It's statistics.
No,
the narrative is the team's not good enough so that he's not winning. But his numbers say that he's still a great player. It is basically the same argument, except you're making it in the other direction.
Hold on, but you haven't heard. You're just making up LeBron James takes about me. Right now, I think LeBron is somewhere from the 8th to 10th best player.
So you heard the exchange there. So basically, the point he was making, I believe, was you're saying that the Joker's stats don't matter because he hasn't won anything with these stats. And on top of that, he shouldn't be considered for MVP because of it. But Rick is then saying you're using the very argument, except it's inverted to serve LeBron. Now, what does he mean by that? Well, you look at something which is quite interesting, which is LeBron is putting up incredible numbers for the advanced age that he's in. I think LeBron's 38 years old, and he's averaging 30 points on the dot with 8.4 rebounds, 7 assists per game, shooting 51% from the field, 31% from the three, which is not good at all. And he's shooting 76% from the free throw line this season. So Nick Wright says that, well, look at his numbers, right? These are fantastic numbers. So therefore, he's playing very well, and he's one of the best players in the NBA because of his numbers. And then he's saying, but wait a minute, you can't use numbers as a reason to say that, well, his numbers are just empty stats in the case of Nikola Jokic, and then turn right back around and say, well, LeBron is putting up exceptional numbers. That's the bias he was pointing to. But the question really then becomes, is it fair? Is what Ric Bucher saying fair? Well, it depends on who you're asking. I think if you're someone that has the same mind as a Nick Wright, then you will think that maybe that's disrespectful. You're looking for another reason to hate or whatever it is. If you ask that person, if you ask somebody that really doesn't have a horse in the race, they'll say, well, he makes a pretty interesting point. He makes an interesting point. Now, to me, I don't think it's one of those gotcha moments where he's like, oh my God, now we finally figured out Nick Wright. No, but it exposed the bias that Nick Wright had. And I think it's also important that we say this. We all have our various biases and we all have our blind spots. So I'm not saying that to say, oh, well, I don't have my blind spots too. Obviously I do. It just takes somebody pointing them out to me like, hey, wait a minute, you're saying all of this, but you're off right here. So it was just something that I noticed on, and I thought it was pretty interesting because Rick and Nick, they always kind of have this back and forth thing, right? And I think Ric Bucher is somebody that kind of appreciates Kobe. And I think that's something that Nick Wright really does not like. And I've seen him get into some pretty spirited debates on television. So hopefully they can put these two together more, because in my personal view, I think Ric Bucher really gives Nick Wright some good pushback, which makes the television more balanced to watch. So these are my thoughts and opinions. So what I want to know from you guys is, what do you think about the exchange that the two of them had? Whatever you guys think, please leave your thoughts in the comment section, and we catch you on the next show. Peace.